H.G. Roast number 2. Gwyneth Paltrow, part 3. You sit at the top table of self-delusion, Paltrow. You encourage people to clean their backsides with $956 wipes, and at the same time, hypocrite that you are, you want people to pity you for the time that in the early 90s when you had to pay for a frappuccino with quarters. You are a hypocrite, and you're out of touch. Your out-of-touch behaviour is demonstrated, for instance, when you made various comments about your struggles as a working mum. In an interview with E!, you lamented your struggles as a working mum. You said, "It's much harder for me. I feel like I set it up in a way that makes it difficult because, for me, like, if I miss a school run, they're like, 'Where were you?' She says. Oh dear, the burden that you have to carry. What a fucking shame. You're a multi-millionairess that's famous, that lives in a huge home which has loads of help, and you're worrying about what people might think about you if you miss a school run. And of course, that's typical of the narcissist you are, because you live by what other people think about you, both in terms of the provision of fuel and also by virtue of the fact that it's a threat to your control. You, of course, don't have any comprehension of what it might be to be a single parent who is getting by on a minimum wage, that is waiting on a bus in the freezing, horizontal-driven rain, trying to get to the school in time, to then be frowned upon by a particular teacher who may well be a narcissist themselves, threatening to involve social services because you've turned up 1 minute to pick up your own child, while struggling to hold down 3 jobs, running around different parts of the same city. You haven't a fucking slightest in that regard, have you, Paltrow? No. Oh, they look at me if I miss the school run. Pity play. She continued, I think it's different when you have an office job because it's routine and you can do all the stuff in the morning and then you come home in the evening. You haven't got a fucking clue. When you're shooting a movie, they're like, we need you to go to Wisconsin for 2 weeks, and then you work 14 hours a day, and that part of it is very difficult. Oh, yes, you poor darling. So difficult being in a huge trailer with a personal assistant to your hair and a personal assistant to your vagina. What a difficult time that you have. I mean, of course, earning up to $20 million for one movie in a year, it's hard to be you, isn't it? Deluded, you're close-minded, you're aloof, you're out of touch with reality. You are a complete fool when it comes to such matters. But it doesn't stop there, because even though you've set up this ridiculous goop company, your own CEO was horrified at having to work with you. Seb Bishop, a number of years ago, quit his high-profile job at your website and lifestyle firm. And apparently he jumped ship because the fact is the company was in massive debt, partly and largely as a consequence of your extravagant spending, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability. In 2012, it took him $1.5 million, but then you got your hands on the profits and you spent every single dime that the company took in and more just on administrative costs. What were those administrative costs? Vagina smelling candles for your house? So then you spent huge amounts on the website itself, the newsletter, and some product costs. That's probably getting your eyebrows done. Then you received loans to directors from the company, and then that wasn't paid back. And so the company was still hemorrhaging it, and you've been plundering its earnings. Asset appropriation, no boundary recognition, sense of entitlement. And therefore, you also forced the company to take on the added expense of relocating its offices from London to Los Angeles. It's no surprise that the CEO jumped ship, faced with this complete mindfuckery, that you think you're a businesswoman, but you're not. You are treating the company as your own personal purse. And once again, demonstrating your self-absorption, which is off the charts. You come out with crap like this. You say, you likened your distaste for negative online comments to the trauma endured by soldiers who have experienced combat. You get called a nasty name and someone has their leg blown off, and you think that it's comparable. You utter self-absorbed numpty. She stated, "You come across online comments about yourself. Well, I'm sure that you go looking for them to make sure that everybody loves you, don't you? And about your friends. And it's a very dehumanizing thing. Pretty similar to all the dehumanizing things that you say about people, Paltrow, but of course you don't notice it because you're a hypocrite. It's almost like how in war you go through this bloody dehumanizing thing. You have compared the hate-filled comments on a below-the-line session to the experiences of going into combat in a war. That demonstrates a complete lack of sensitivity. You don't pretend to care in the slightest. You simply don't. You breeze around with your mouth flapping, coming out with all of this absolutely nonsensical bullshit. And the problem is that people then realise how problematic you are. But of course, what you can always do is do as Harry's wife does. And no doubt her PR machine has learnt from your PR machine, because wasn't it the case, Paltrow, that you were once named the world's most beautiful woman? Now, to look at you, one wouldn't say you're ugly. You're not. Some people would say that you're attractive. Of course, the dead eyes are a little bit of a giveaway, the saccharine grin that's fixed in the usual rictus of our kind, but many people wouldn't see through all of that. However, what occurred is that in People magazine, some time ago, they announced you to be the world's most beautiful woman. And of course, your PR team paid that magazine to name you as such. Assertion of control, the need to have people like you, the necessity of asserting that control through bribery demonstrates your sense of entitlement and that need to be seen as beautiful, and you simply don't care that you bought it. It really doesn't matter. And the fact is that you go around purchasing awards such as that, costing goodness knows how much, and yet you have a reputation for being one of the biggest cheapskates and worst tippers in Hollywood. You're described as having a snobby reputation, that every time the waiter brings you the check, you don't stump up. And apparently you blame that, the fact that you offer paltry trips, on the fact that you're bad at maths. Well, I suppose you actually might be, given that you couldn't actually weigh up how to run a company properly and that you would plunder all of its profits. But here, that sense of entitlement not to give an appropriate tip to somebody who is not earning a lot of money and indeed get by on the tips. It's the industry standard that the tips that are provided supplement the wages so that they get to a more meaningful level. Businesses rely upon that. It's the unwritten rule. But of course, you won't do that because you have no emotional empathy. What's yours is yours. It's to be spent more on pedicures and manicures and glittery dresses that cling to your emaciated frame, and for you to put on some vag makeup or whatever it is that you're using. No. You have no emotional empathy for anybody else. You can't be bothered to ensure that they receive a decent payment, despite the fact that you're a multimillionairess. Your sense of entitlement demonstrated once again your lack of emotional empathy, all too clear to see. And of course, we can't roast you, Gwyneth, without mentioning that utter tripe that was the conscious uncoupling. When you separated back in 2014, you said that you were just consciously uncoupling. Word salad. Utter bollocks. You announced plans to consciously uncouple. Other people would say separate, be apart, get divorced. But no. Once again, beep, 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 the pretension machine is in full effect as you come out with this self-obsessed garbage. At the time, you wrote, in many ways, we are closer than we have ever been. And you concluded that, while we love each other, we very much will remain separate. But it went further than that, Because what you actually did, driving home the fact that you really do see yourself as the most important person on the planet, that the fact that you believe that yourself to be a guru, the font of all knowledge, the person that understands so much about everything and everybody, that you came out with a 2,000-word article by Dr. Habib Sadeghi and Dr. Sherry Sami that spelt out what you were doing with regard to your enlightened lives. The report sections included Until Death Do Us Part, End of the Honeymoon, Intimacy and Insects, Consciously Uncoupling, Wholeness and Separation, and Coming Together. What a load of pretentious shite. What you've actually done is find some bollocks, and through character acquisition you took it and applied it to your situation. The report stated, divorce is a traumatic and difficult decision for all parties involved, and there's arguably no salve besides time to take that pain away. However, when the whole concept of marriage and divorce is re-examined, there's actually something far more powerful and positive at play. According to the report, high divorce rates should be viewed in the context of our skyrocketing life expectancy and simple human nature. It's argued that social norms are contradictory with people's true needs, writing, our biology and psychology aren't set up to be one person, with one person for 4, 5 or 6 decades. Funny how many people manage it though, don't they? Those that have emotional empathy. The idea of being married to one person for life is too much pressure for anyone. Well, that justifies it, doesn't it? And you call it as a conscious uncoupling. Quite simply, he was the intimate partner primary source that was in devaluation, and you decided to disengage from him. Of course, you don't see it that way because of your narcissism blinds you to it, but instead what it causes you to do is just dispense with him as the appliance that he is, and then to waft around the nonsense by calling it a conscious uncoupling. Absolute horseshit of the highest order. In fact, I may well now create a new award. Horseshit. The Order of the Horseshit. Order of Horseshit. No, the Order of the Horseshit sounds better. And I'm going to give you a 5-star triple-barred The Order of the Horseshit Award, Paltrow, for this kind of pretentious nonsense that you spout. Of course, it's to be expected with you. This is how you live your life. And we're going to learn even more about this as we get to part 4 of our roast. Join me there.